Some big news that's done the rounds this week has been that Gen Z Brits are apparently not proud to be British, wouldn't go to war for Britain, and they think that the UK is racist too. Many people were eager to offer their opinions about this, amongst them Nigel Farage. He stated this is evidence that the education system is broken. I think that's Nige walking the tightrope there. I don't think that's the issue. We're all aware the main problem is that many members of Gen Z aren't actually white British. If you look at this graph from births in 2023, it's getting even more shocking. You can see that half of all births in England were white British in 2023. In London, only 21%, so 1 in 5 babies being born in London is white British. That's unbelievable. Yet what's at the heart of this is the development of two Britons. You could say historical Britain on the one side and the UK on the other. The latter is well represented here by Nesreen Malik in The Guardian. She states a Britain proud of its present and realistic about its past, that means hates itself, is taking shape with the angry right trailing behind. That's right, Nesreen, you're the calm, wise people who are going to lead us into a liberal utopian future. I'm sure nothing will go wrong. And then you have the actual British people whose ancestry goes back in the British Isles hundreds, if not thousands, of years. We have one section amongst this group who have been trained to hate themselves and everything to do with Britain, and the majority of them who despair at the state of their country. We can see this tale of two Britons at play in this clip, where members of the public walking the streets of London are asked whether they would fight for the UK.
Ooh, good question. Well, I'm not sure I would feel compelled to fight in any general sense.
I think it's so difficult to know whether we would now fight for Britain unless you had chosen to join the army, unless you're faced with that decision. It's so difficult because it would just depend on what the fight was for.
I would never feel compelled to fight for this country. I'm very much a pacifist. I think the threats are very different now.
Oh, absolutely. It's my adopted country, so yeah, totally.
I would absolutely refuse. There's nothing they could do that would make me fight. No way.
It's not something I would wish to leave my wife and my children, travel to an alien place and be handed a gun and said march towards those very big guns and those people who want to kill you. But saying that, I'm British, I have freedoms, I have rights, and those rights are the rights my children have. So if I looked into the eyes of my wife and my children and said I have to defend those rights and I have to really, really stand up for those rights because they're what I believe in, then who knows? Could I do it? I don't know.
Definitely, if the values that we all stand for, the values of peace, respect for human life, democracy, if these values are challenged, I think I personally will join the ranks.
I especially like the last guy. For the sake of peace, he'll go to war. To defend the value of human life, he'll kill. That's a total contradiction in terms, you great numpty. But the main point I want to get to here is the two white Brits in the clip both flat out refused to fight. They interpret the question as, would you fight for Britain traditionally? And because they've been taught that British identity is bad and it's morally good to be against it, they want nothing to do with defending their own country and people. I'm sure they'd think the very idea of having your own people is somehow evil and racist. Of course, they wouldn't think the same about Palestinians or Indians or Maori. That's because they feel if they acknowledge their British history and identity, that's not inclusive to our new arrivals. And you may have noted many of the people coming from ethnic backgrounds here, when they say they would consider defending Britain, are not defending Britain itself, but liberal values. Now, call me a cynic, but I don't buy this for a second. People don't go to war for values. Sure, you could get some mercenary to parrot whatever you want them to, but in human history, people go to war for their nations and for their people. We see this with Israel and Palestine at the moment. We see it with Russia and Ukraine. We saw it in the First and Second World Wars, where men would dive to the front lines and face brutal conditions because they heard the call of their country. Now, we can argue all day about the rights and wrongs of whether young men should have fought certain wars or not, but what we can't deny is that people do fight for their nations and their people. It stirs something deep in their soul, and a country that can't defend itself is one that cannot stand. And this is the problem modern Britain now has. On the one side you have the UK, stocked full of people who'd never defend the country, and on the other side you have people who would defend the country, but are starting to wonder what on earth the point would be. This is well expressed in tweets such as this: dying for Britain in the 21st century means being shipped to Afghanistan to fight for Rory Stewart and US aid. You might get a park bench. 14 years after your death, the venue your fiancé had lined up for a post-tour wedding is requisitioned for a Serco migrant Afghan hotel. Remember, it's patriots that fight wars, and what sort of patriots want to walk down the main streets of their capital cities and not see any of their own people there, in fact feel actively disliked and unwelcome? Do you think it inspires them when they see smug Labour MPs who look like they've escaped from their day shift at the local creche to pour their smothering mother energy on the country tell them that they should be pro-migration because Paddington Bear was an asylum seeker? Do you think it inspires them when they go on the London Underground and see adverts for their own colonisation in reverse? Do you think it inspires them when they go to the shop to pick up some bits and see what looks like bulletproof glass protecting the staff from the consumers so Tesco's doesn't get too enriched? Do you think they like it when their tax money gets spent on university grants so overgrown teenagers can do another PhD report into the architecture of whiteness? Now, as the UK drives traditional Britain mad, our mainstream media will sanction shows to show us what evil bigots we are, as if some form of oppression of minorities is the biggest problem the UK faces. Apparently ITV has now done a documentary too about Britain's fascist fight club. Now, I don't know who these people are, as it's had to say many times, because we're in Keir Starmer's Britain. I'm not pro any form of violence, not pro any form of hate or attacking anybody. But what does the liberal mainstream expect? It relentlessly pours mass immigration into the country, demonises the host culture, and then expects everything to go along swimmingly. The propaganda now is so obvious, it's not even working on the new arrivals to this country anyway. Here's a couple of the top comments underneath that video. Number 1, I'm half English, half Pakistani. Being between two races like I am means I've always seen the good and bad in each. And when it comes to the Pakistani immigrant side, there is indeed a large group who don't and won't integrate or even hostile to the native Brits now. He continues, I've seen this coming since I was a kid. I don't know, but this isn't fixable. It's a shame because the earlier immigrants who came in the 60s did actually integrate. It's the people who've come since then who have spoiled it. In fact, now the country is flooded with the very people the earlier immigrants were trying to immigrate away from. He ends by telling people to get out of the UK before it collapses. Here's another one. As a Sikh, I can't blame these people for their ideology. Their culture is being attacked. Look at the Khalistan movement, that's a nationalist Sikh movement. It's a fascist group at heart. And this points to an important truth that our mainstream always ignores. The quote, far-right fascism. This rises when people feel deeply under threat. The mainstream acts like it's some sort of flu or cold that you can just randomly catch. In essence, the globalist leftist liberal system undermines the people's culture and tradition of a given nation, and then when the inevitable reaction comes, they say, look at these awful, terrible bigots, even though they've created them in the first place. So all of this is the inevitable result of the friction caused between traditional Britain and Mytho UK. And this is only possible in the first place because it's all part of being in a globalist empire which seeks to undermine our very identity anyway. Until Britain, like any European or even global nation, breaks free of that grip, it will never truly find itself. However, I do believe that traditional Britain will win because the tradition is ultimately transcendent, unlike the material Mytho UK. If you do wish to learn more about my views, feel free to subscribe to my Substack down below. There's a lot of work in there about tradition and personal transformation to help us deal with the chaos of the modern age. Other than that, do let me know your thoughts about this down below. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, and do enjoy the rest of your day.